Hey everybody, you might have noticed I missed I usually post on Mondays and Thursdays, but I also told you early on that I wasn't going to show you me in distressed states, so I'll probably save the reason why till the end of the video, if at all, because it's just sad. But I haven't been well, and actually haven't been able to work on Leopold and Brain for about a week, which is catastrophic, for the theme of this video series, because every terminal cancer patient never knows exactly how long they have to live. But because of that, I gotta grind every day to get this race won. So hopefully I can get back to work soon. I worked a little bit yesterday. The math still works out if I can get back to it, and it's really just kind of a general misery and some nausea, and my sleep has been bad. But this episode might not be for you, because unless you're a Leopold and Bring fan or a fan of me reading to you, I'm going to do another chapter from Leopold and Bring 4. And at the end, I might put on like what I've been struggling with. So, I understand if you give it a skip. Please, if you can leave a like, even though it's a huge lie, I'd appreciate it. And I will see you next time with some fun, way more art, way more fun stuff, hopefully. Not that, I love this chapter, it's pretty fun. But, and to set that up, people bring 1, 2, 3, and this was it, right? So at the end of 3, this goes on. Let's go through it quickly, because it is just Brink ready to take Leopold on the next big adventure. And I'm going to jump right into reading chapter 2, which pretty much takes up immediately after this scene. And I'm going to show some footage of a game I played years ago that came out called Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which after years of researching 5th century Athens and Greece, was such a relief to just cheat and walk through and have a blast exploring, and they did all the work for me. So, like, of course, the character I designed is Wonder Woman, my second most favorite obsessive pop culture icon. And I did a very loose bit of footage of kind of what I'll be reading from. Okay. Oh, right. And then this is the only, so here was the cover concept for Leopold and Bring 4, and then the only piece of art I ever did for the interior was this. And it's, let's leave this up for a minute while I start reading, because it's this scene. Okay, chapter 2, The Measure of Man, from Leopold and Bring 4, the novel. Brink struggled, oh my goodness, here we go already. I'm still feeling a little off, but hopefully this will work out. Let's give it another go. Brink struggled to keep Leopold's body above water. It felt like he weighed more here. She expected to see a coastline nearby, but it was all endless sea in every direction except the one full of thrusting arms and hardwood poles. She grabbed one, and a few grunting, heroic moments later, they were on the deck of a ship at sunset, surrounded by golden brown men who looked at them as if they were idiots. Gazing past their muscled shoulders, the coast was now clear. One of the sailors, crouched next to the immobile Leopold, smacked his face brightly and leaned in to feel for breath. Another bellowed at Brink, "What are you doing out here, woman?" "We were swept out by currents," she said, excited that she understood his tricky regional accent. "Our nets were full." There was silence. The sloshing of waves against the ship's hull became an eerie, shallow breathing. All of the men gathered and stared. There probably wasn't any fishing around this time of year. Her own accent must be terrible, and there was a war on with the neighbors. So a foreigner, female, inexplicably at sea, with an apparently dead local. Whoops, she thought, hiding her joy at how that thing's becoming this chaotic so early in the trip. They shouted mostly incomprehensible slang at her, mean, sexist stuff she hadn't come across in her extensive study of the period. She listened patiently, trying to figure out who she was dealing with and what had gone wrong, until one grabbed her hood and a handful of hair, another her underarm. They tried to drag her over the edge of the boat, but she threw them off like annoying kid brothers. She took the largest by his shoulders, dug her fingers into the muscles of his broad back, and brought him to his knees. He strained to keep from crying out. The rest backed away, aghast and fascinated. She took a moment, her first moment, to look around in awe at the web of worn ropes, the shocked look of the face of the dutiful, salty-bearded helmsman, the smell of the moist winter air, the feel of the thick skin and sweat of the man in her grip before releasing him. He tumbled onto his face, arms useless. The others helped him retreat. Their confusion turned to fear, a new look on their faces, as if they were watching after being lost at sea for years, an island paradise melt under an erupting volcano. Brink couldn't fathom what struck them so deeply until she felt the wind on her wet hair. Her hood, loosened by the effort, had fallen to her neck, exposing her chimeric face and muted purple hair. She slowly lifted up calming hands and said in her best 5th century Greek, "Easy, boys, I'm just a girl." They skittered about like a legislation of baboons. "I know what she is," said one, comforting them with categorization. "She is a goddess of Libya." Brink was bummed. She wasn't surprised that they were familiar with the animal hybrid gods of the kingdom to the south, but it was exactly what she'd hoped to avoid, her looks mucking up the adventure so soon after it had begun. She played along to facilitate her and Leopold's departure. "I'm here to protect this Athenian boy. Really, I will cause no more trouble if you leave us alone," she said. "Any chance for a ride back to Piraeus?" Power calculations lit their wild eyes. This goddess was strong, they thought, but not large, and jovial, therefore weak, but weak enough to overcome. Brink left them to their scheming and crouched beside the not yet conscious Leopold, lifting him into her arms. She stepped up on the ship's low railing and prepared to jump back in the water, taking a moment to appreciate the scene, the swaying ship, the absence of any mechanical sound, the wind pushing favorably across this large square sail above them, when a voice wailed across the ship, "My master demands to know the cause of this violent flopping about." A short triangle of a man in a flowing peach gown approached, took one look at Brink, turned calmly, and returned below deck. Brink looked back at the man. "I'd love to stay and play," she said, "but I can see we're imposing. I can't decide which one of you I love the most. My blessing shall go to..." She bent at the knee, once again preparing to leap, when the stout man reappeared, imploring her to wait. He was helping an old man up creaking steps. "Do you understand me?" the old man called across the ship, his voice like an exhausted but loving father. "My dialect will frustrate you," Brink said, keeping an eye on the sailors. "What is your mother tongue?" the old man said, moving confidently across the deck. "It's distant, far, far to the west, like way over there," she said, extending her long arm towards the setting sun. "I've traveled great distances, but I've never seen a woman with a beauty like yours." Brink hoped she'd translated that correctly. "May we help your companion?" he asked, looking over Leopold. "He is dead," shouted one of the crew accusingly. "Is this true?" the old man asked with concern. "He's fine," said Brink. "He has faint breath and he can sleep through anything." "You cannot trust her," another added. "She is a foreign god, stronger than all of us." The man's companions shot him dirty looks. "Is this true?" the old man asked politely. "Yes," she said, cracking her fingers in their direction. "I am indeed stronger than all of them." The sailors made more disapproving sounds. The old man looked over them. "Have you tried to sneak her on for some purpose I would not approve?" he said. The allegation caused a moment of doubt as the men looked at each other, trying to remember who brought her aboard. Brink wondered if this was a cue for her to make a break for it, but there were too many unanswered questions. She and Leopold were supposed to be in open water close to shore at a time when sea travel was rare. That they would appear directly in a ship's path and one belonging to a non-military figure like this was troubling. "Let's get some dry clothing for you both," said the old man. The servant was quiet. He was a watcher. Over the years he'd been with his master, he'd also become a thinker and relished the skills he'd inherited, analyzing expressions, how bodies moved, the words a man chose, the words a woman chose, and what may come next in any situation. Though he couldn't read Brink's intention or state of mind, he knew she would stay, and she did. The old man's caregiver walked back to the stern and started back down the steep steps, gesturing for Brink to follow. The tiny cabin was adorned with books, a hanging plant, a species Brink was shocked to find she couldn't recognize, an ornate chest, a rich man's modest quarters on a relatively modest yacht. A thin hammock filled with warm furs hung folded against a wall. The rest of the ship at this level contained seating for absent rowers, unemployed during winter. The servant produced a violent wool chiton, chiton, from a large chest and handed the neatly folded fabric to Brink, who accepted the comfy clothing giddily. He pulled out a deep purple himation of much heavier fabric for Leopold. The evening was becoming chilly. "If you need help with the pins, I'm Dyphon. I will be just above," he said, involuntarily scrunching his nose on his way out. Brink smiled broadly. She turned and sat quietly for a moment, closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She changed Leopold's clothes and put him on a flat, flame-colored rug. She studied his silent expression and tried to keep herself from getting emotional. A lapse in her concentration could be disastrous from him at this point. She kissed his cheek and pressed his face against his, then went back up to find the old man lounging in a patio at the end of the long, thin ship. He invited her to sit. The seamen zigzagged along the coast against a counterwind, shooting occasional dirty looks Brink's way. "Would you like some wine?" "Good Lord, yes," Brink cried in English. "That is your language?" he asked, shocked and half smiling like a child hearing a balloon pop for the first time. She corrected herself and returned to Greek. "I'm sorry, I would love to have some wine. I was excited by your question." "That I could tell, but what a deliberate tongue. Give me more." "Are you aware of the tribes far north and west? Not barbarians," she struggled, that word meaning any non-Greek. "We are surrounded by foreigners, child. I am one myself, but I believe you refer to a people well beyond my travels. If you tell me you are Hyperborean, I will not be entirely surprised and will do a happy dance for you." "Then I'm definitely from Hyperborea," she said, waiting anxiously. The old man twitched his heavy eyebrows and spit out a seed. "I sometimes wish my world was magical. Where I come from is all too real, and my language is a combination of many other languages over a long period of violent nonsense," she said, taking a long sip. The wine was tasty, weirdly sweet, less watered down than Brink expected. "I'm afraid I will be unable to redirect our voyage. If you need to return to the great city, I can insist they put into shore where it is safe for you to travel back before we get too far away." "Where are you headed?" Brink asked. "A long, convoluted journey, I'm afraid. Back to my home in Abdera, to gather what is left of my life there, then on to what is left of my life in Sicily, closer, I imagine, to where you're from." Moving is always such a hassle," Brink said. The old man laughed again. He leaned close to her and took her hand. She became flushed. His hand was warm and strong. She laughed at herself, her behavior surprising to both of them. "What happened to you, dear? What sort of slippery fish have we caught?" She poured herself some more wine. The man's face was impossibly kind and deep. She hadn't prepared well enough to know who he was, and fought the impulse to find out by cheating. "May I touch your face?" the man asked, surprising Brink. Curious, and yes. "What you say about language is a tangle," he said, his fingertips brushing the outward curve of her face faintly. "You share openly but cannot find anyone who understands. This is familiar to me." She felt paralyzed with bliss. His hands were inside her head, carefully cushioning her from worry. Something must be wrong, she thought. There was no way this was a coincidence, but the attention she could give to analysis showed nothing strange. Everything was smooth sailing. The man sat back, sensing Brink was distant. "Now you must tell me," he said. "What were you up to in that brisk water?" "That is my son," she said. We had a terrible fight with his father and he dumped us in the sea. It is fortunate you came along." The old man listened quietly. "I wanted to attend the Linnea, but he wouldn't allow it. When I insisted and insulted him, he paddled us from our home in Corinth and told me to enjoy the show, pushing us from the boat very far from shore. My son grew exhausted, keeping me and my heavy bottom afloat. When he passed out, I kept us up the best I could, and then you miraculously arrived." He listened politely, leaned forward, and took hold of her hand again. She could tell he knew she was lying, but she couldn't tell how. That pleased her greatly. "That is the truth, a wildly contorted version, but a truth, I swear." "Men can be problematic to women like you, I understand," he quietly replied. "Wow, you are at least as slippery as me," Brink said. "Truth, like the sea, is more than its turbulent surface," said the old man. "Problematic because of my strength, looks, or narrative manipulation?" The old man laughed and clapped, dropping Brink's hand. She could feel the disconnection like a comfy blanket being removed. She had to look more closely at what was going on, so she checked out the conversation, keeping her countenance attuned enough to appear attentive, which, due to the highly intuitive nature of her host, was likely failing. He went on for some time about the way things were changing politically, an historical summation of the agonizing collapse of an empire that didn't know it was collapsing. Brink found it hard not to listen carefully to his words as she worked. She almost didn't catch when he asked a question. "I made a living from trying to show the truth in the shadows of language," he said. "That is why I am on this boat, a boat I once owned, that I've traded my life for. Athens' current wisdom has deigned my investigations antagonize her faith. Having been exiled from the great city on the charge of questioning the role of the gods in the affairs of men, I must ask if you are proof of my foolishness." "You're asking if I'm of Olympus?" Brink said, fully returning to the conversation. or are related elsewhere. I'm from the same world as you, I promise, said Brink. Yes, I know. You look disappointed. I'm disappointed that I'd hoped you'd answered otherwise, said the old man. For years I've imagined a rich history of our world, our birth not from divinity, but from slow natural forces, and that story could capture the imagination as profoundly as the tales of our heroes. But I am as eager for you to be magical as much as any child. I can change my answer. The old man leaned over, put his head on Brink's forehead, then kissed his hand. I could go on if I were a younger man, but I must retire for a few hours at least. The safest place for you to disembark would be the eastern coast, which we will see tomorrow. You sail at night? This is an unconventional journey. You are welcome to share my bed, though it is small and may be a discomfort. Your companion is quite safe where he is. I can't pass up a night staring at these stars, Brink said. It can get very cold. I thought you were too tired, she said, teasing. I am far too old and snore much too loud, young lady, he said as he disappeared below. She laid back and stretched her long arms towards the sleepy moon. She tracked the progress of the boat not by stars, but by the heroes, monsters, and gods painted in pinpoints across the black canvas. She closed her eyes, half snoozing. The next moment she was blind, bound, and moving. With slick precision, the men, waiting nearby in silence, rolled her into a heavy net, knocked her over the side at one swift move. They watched her sink and made a prayer to the god of the sea, his glorious temple moonlit on the nearby Union coast. I realize now the footage is for the next chapter. But I guess I left some of it up probably. If not, it's just the boat scene. Okay, that wasn't as long as I thought. I hope you enjoyed it. It gets even more hectic after that. Will I tell you why I've been in a bad state? I'll just say this. I'm not a New Age person at all. I'm not really into aphorisms or self-help in any way, unfortunately. But I had a really kind of traumatic week last week that I guess I set myself up for. But I guess I'll go over this and just decide whether to cut this out. When you have childhood trauma like I did, you got to heal from it. And it really is the responsibility of those people taking care of you to give you space and whatever help you need to do that. And if that doesn't happen, it really fucks your life up. And I had a mess of a life because of it. And it took a really long time for me to actively engage and take the time to do any healing. Part of that healing started when I finally cut myself off from that family that was really not helpful for me when I was a kid. I mean, they fed me and they gave me a place to live, but I was so desperate for healing that was never available that I just could never bond with them. I couldn't trust them, and it was just a mess. I mean, anyway, when I was in the hospital, one of my cousins set up a group chat full of family members that I'd mostly been estranged from for decades. And they expressed, words of kindness and love and just the attention, and it was really, really, really nice. And I kind of, to put it crudely, fell for it and joined in the chat. And unfortunately, at some point, I made a joke. I was very jovial and I was feeling really good throughout this. But I made a joke that, I got to talk to my shrink about how the attention here's really fallen off. And I did, of course, mean it a little bit as a statement of fact. The attention had gone from 80% to 20%, but I was fine, and it was just part of the humor that I'd been working on throughout that healing process and healing with them process. But I started getting attacked in there, and it just snowballed. Everything I said made it worse and worse, and though they kept saying, "We love you," they did show it at all, and I just went right back to that time when I wasn't able to heal. And I think they set my healing back a lot, because I just entered this week of nausea and weakness and inability to work and really do anything. And I don't know if I've said this before, but I now have about 6 or 7 tumors growing rapidly in my head. And I feel miserable. I feel a lot better today. I appreciate your patience listening to this horrible crap. But I brought up that New Age thing, the aphorism thing, because this morning I just kind of stumbled on this phrase while I was showering that really gave me this weird strength. And I don't know why it worked or if it works or what's going on here, but like, check this out. I said to myself, you can heal yourself. And it just, and I don't mean you could like manufacture chemo drugs. It's not like I'm not being an idiot, but I am being like sincere about, you must take care of yourself if no one else will. You can't just wait for people to be there for you if you know that they're not going to be there for you. So you can heal yourself. And I'm using the second person because I'm talking to myself in a mirror, but I'm talking to you too. Like if you had anything like this when you're young, you can do it. You can get yourself healthy. You can go back. You can raise yourself again. You can raise that child you were and needed love. You can heal yourself. Okay, this is getting super heavy, and I'm sorry to be such a killjoy. But I got to get back on track, and I'm glad you guys are here with me. If you're still listening to this, big love to you, no matter who you are. And I will see you next time. You can heal yourself. Bye.